Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to this Twitter space. We are very happy to host this session on this very special day where we're commemorating International Women's Day. I want to welcome all of our speakers today. We have women from all over the world joining. And we're very, very happy and honored for that. So let me introduce our speakers. We have with us Aishwarya Soni, Deputy Manager and Strategic and Visual Communications at ITDP India. We also have Lorena Freitas from ITDP Brazil. She's in charge of travel demand at the ITDP Brazil program. Julia Remers is a communications specialist at TUMI GIZ. Lina Quiñones from the Espacio Bogotá is in charge of healthy cities. And Kalpana Vishwanath is the co-founder of Safety Pin. Welcome to you all. I want to share, first of all, some, logistics for the session. We want to agree that only designated speakers will be able to speak, and we will have some time for questions towards the end of the session. If listeners have a question, comment for our speakers, please use the emoji icon to raise your hand and our host can unmute. Listeners can only speak if using the Twitter mobile app on our smartphone. We have accessibility options available for live captioning. You just have to go into settings, into the settings menu for options. And I also want to let you know that this space will be recorded and can be listened to and shared afterwards from the ITDP HQ account. So with that in place, I just want to begin and as a framework for a space, say that ITDP has been working on gender several years from now. We began with Access and Gender, which was a research paper back in the days. And all the different offices around the world at ITDP have done local work, not only around gender, but other agendas that cross, that are cross-cutting, just as race and income, as Brazil did. We just launched a study from China on gender that you can find on our website. As I said, ITDP Brazil developed the Women and Children Access to the City report. The ITDP India program created the Women and Transport Policy Brief with Safety Pin that is here with us today, creating a framework for policymakers to improve safety for women in walking, cycling, and public transport. ITDP Indonesia has a video from 2019 highlighting their work to implement gender-inclusive transportation design, titled Creating Safe Cities for Women. You can check out that video as well. And each year, ITDP Mexico publishes the ranking Ciclociudades, an integral policy brief for cycling mobility with gender perspective in the recent years. So with that, I would like to share the floor with our speakers, and maybe you can all talk about your own work regarding gender and transportation. Please, can we begin with Aishwarya?
Hello, everyone. I'm Aishwarya from the ITDP India team. And our work with gender, like Veronica had mentioned, really peaked when we had created the Women in Transport, the policy brief itself, which is a guiding document for how governments in India should be prioritizing women's mobility in Indian spaces and in Indian transport systems itself. And right now, with the challenges that we have with the national government as well, prioritizing women in walking spaces, in cycling, but also in public transport is something that we're continuously working towards as well. And I'd like to now pass on to other speakers who can share more about their work as well.
Perfect. Let's continue with Lorena.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Lorena Freitas from ITDP Brazil. It's an honor being here with you guys talking about this today. And at first, I think this is important to say that I'm not exactly an English speaker. I'm actually an English student, so I'm doing my best. But if you don't understand anything, please let me know, right? So here in Brazil, we've been working on the gender-sensitive transportation for some years. Initially, we started discussing female mobility in general, but at certain points, we understood that gender cut is not enough. So now we are trying to study more the intersectionality between race and gender as a cross-cutting team. And so we've been developing some studies about that. In our data platform, for example, called Mobilidados, we work with PNT and PNB that are both indicators that ITDP in general works with. But in here, we work with especially the group of Black women. So I think this helps us to make an advocacy more sensitive to this intersectionality. We also had made journalistic series called The Color of Mobility. The main idea was discuss racism and mobility in general, but we find some interesting things about gender too. And in the last year, we developed a study with the SIG of São Paulo called, in Portuguese, Transporte para Todas, but in English it's something like Women and Mobility. And we are in the final stage before the publication, but I think this is important to mention that because this was probably the first study where we actually work in an intersectionality way with the social markers, race and gender, and apply it to our territory. So we are very concerned about this idea of gender and race because of the inequalities that we have here in Brazil. We understand this is very important.
Thank you, Lorena. And yeah, I mean, I'm also a non-English speaker, so I'm sure that that's okay, and we will all be on the same page with you. And I want to present now Julia Remers from TUMI GIZ. Julia, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Julia Remas. I work with the Transformative Urban Mobility Initiative TUMI, and within that, the initiative Women Mobilize Women, which is also a network that works globally to advance gender equitable mobility, to create leadership capacity, to highlight the work of role models in the field with an annual publication. And the focus today of the work with Women Mobilize Women for me will be a recent study conducted with Where's My Transport around the topic of the experience of women in daily transport in different African cities.
Thank you, Julia. And you just released also the new edition of Women Mobilize Women as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct. This year's edition of the Remarkable Women is called Remarkable Feminist Voices in Transport. And I'm happy to share the link later on.
Yeah, please do. And as we go on the session, maybe you can share with us the link to the publications we are referencing to, so all the participants are have access to what we are talking about. That would be amazing and a great value for this session. To continue, Lina, can you please also share more about your work at Espacio, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Lina Quiñones. I am Healthy Cities Lead at Espacio. And at Espacio, we always mainstream the gender focus into everything we do. We have been working for several years now on gender and mobility, especially on promoting on researching and advocating for women and sustainable transport, specifically cycling. There is a huge gap in urban cycling in between men and women. And now specifically, I am also working on mainstreaming gender focus on public space projects. Public spaces in cities, and particularly Colombian cities, are mostly occupied and designed by and for men. And this is especially true for young people. So we are also working on having better spaces and more welcoming spaces for women, and especially young women and girls.
Thank you so much, Lina. Gracias. The Espacio has been one of the first movers on gender in the mobility community, and we're very thankful for all their work and opening this path for many other organizations now. And Kalpana, last but not least, please share with us more of your work.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, but good evening from here in Delhi. I'm Kalpana Vishwanath, and I am a co-founder and CEO of SafetyPin. SafetyPin is a social organization that, with the mission to build a world where everyone can move around without fear, specifically focusing on women and other excluded groups. SafetyPin is happy to have partnered with many of you already. ITDP, Despacio, we're all partners, and we have worked together. So what we do is we collect data using different technology apps that we have, and we work with city governments, municipal governments, transport departments to assess the level of gender responsiveness of both public spaces, public infrastructure, as well as mobility services in cities. We have worked in cities in India, but as well as globally in Latin America. We've worked in Bogota, in Sao Paulo, in Buenos Aires, but also in South Africa, in Kenya, and many cities in India and around Asia. So our focus is really to provide data that is bottom-up data, as well as qualitative, quantitative, spatial data that can help city governments and mobility actors in cities to make decisions, to make interventions that will make our cities more gender responsive. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here, Kalpana. We will begin with Lorena. Lorena, you mentioned ITDP's Brazil work on gender and equity and race. So can you maybe we can just have a deep dive on how those race and wealth in Brazil's major cities affect mobility, and what impacts does that have on women and girls in particular? Because we know that women move differently, and the space should be designed in a different way for them. But when we talk about women and income and race, that even deepens more. So can you please share more around that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Vero, for the question. Here in Brazil, I think we have, in the most part of our cities and metropolitan areas, I think we have a huge problem for women about safety. Violence is a thing that is in the life of the Brazilian people in general, but for women, I think this is more heavy, maybe. And this affects directly our mobility and I say our because I'm including myself in this group, but of course I'm talking about the results of our studies, right? But I think the violence is a thing that is constantly in our life, and the fear that we have is a little bit different. It's different from the fears that men have while they are traveling around the city. So, for example, while men probably are afraid of being robbery, the greatest fears of women are being raped. So the sexual violence here is a thing that are in our lives as women in general. But when we are talking about Black women, there are another thing that is the racial violence. So for Black women, the violence is different, and we should think with that the Black women here have less access for the infrastructures. So talking a little bit about the PNT and PNB here in Brazil, we see that in the in all of our capitals, the percentage of Black women near rapid transit infrastructure or cycling infrastructure is lower when we comparing with the women in general or the total of the population. So I think that this is a thing that put another problem in this situation. So here, Black women have to deal every day with lack of offer in public systems, have to deal with long journeys of commuting, have to deal with sexual violence and harassment, and also with the racial violence too. So I don't know if I was clear, but I think this is the most important things that I should point about the situation here.
I think you were very clear, and I think women in color around the world can relate to this unjust component on transportation and mobility that touches the agenda on race and equity. Here in Mexico, women of color, or with low income, they also face more challenges at the time to when public transportation is designed, the amount of miles that they have to walk or move to just access a bus is definitely longer than women with or people with higher income. So yes, definitely, you were very clear, and I think we can relate around the world. And now we want to continue this conversation also because I think public safety for women and girls is a key issue also in India. What have we learned from the national challenges about what needs to be done to improve safety and access in Indian cities? Aishwarya, maybe you can shed some light around this topic.
Sure, sure. So, when we rolled out the challenges itself for walking and cycling, the first step we wanted to know was understand the perception of safety amongst the public and especially women. What did they feel about cycling in their cities? And it validated the fears that we'd already had, but especially with respect to harassment, about 2 out of 5 women feared being harassed while cycling on the streets itself. And out of the many concerns, poor street lighting, inactive edges, the presence of say shops like alcohols and other antisocial activities were a big concern for them. And if we were to change all of these things, they said that they were more willing to cycle. About 93% said that they would cycle in case we made our streets safer, more convenient for walking and cycling itself. So that shed light on what our priority areas with respect to women needed to be itself. And safe and accessible infrastructure ranks the top most in terms of what women need itself. And this means that we create protected cycle lanes, we have well lit sidewalks, we have pedestrian crossings which are accessible, which are at grade as well. And in cities that were able to create these kind of infrastructures, anecdotes from women, the results from surveys that we've conducted there, they are very empowering. And women say that, this has made a difference in how they are able to now confidently and independently move about itself. So that's something that we thought was our number one lesson, that while campaigns are important, community engagements, all of these things are very important, but at the end of the day, it's also important for them to feel safe through the infrastructure that's created for them as well. Even with our the public transport surveys that we had conducted, about 65% of them said that they'd faced harassments of some kind, either on the way to the bus stop or at the bus stop, within the bus, or had rude behaviors from the driver or conductors as well. And creating public transport systems which are going to be safe for women is also a key target area for us. We've also realized that when we're creating these spaces on the streets, we would include the groups to participate. For example, the tactical urbanism initiatives that were done while testing out pilot interventions, we would include the groups as well. And we felt that there was more ownership, but also more gender based planning itself when women were part of the decision making as well as the implementation process. And I think that's also a very key thing, that there needs to be representation from women while planning, as well as during the implementation stages of these interventions itself. Another thing that we found out was that some women know how to cycle, but very few of them have access to cycles itself. So the numbers look like 6 of them knew how to cycle, but only 6 out of 10 knew how to cycle, but only 1 of them had access to cycles itself. And to be able to bolster the freedom of mobility itself and have them move independently, especially for short distances, we thought that it's very important for them, for the cities to conduct training programs, as well as have access to cycles either through cycle sharing schemes or through public cycle systems as well. So these were 2 important areas that we recognize. And the city of Kochi in south of India had a successful cycle with Kochi program, where they got about 300 women trained on how to be able to cycle itself. And again, the kind of shares that they say after being empowered to cycle are quite heartwarming, because a lot of men from their families would ridicule them or say things like, you'd never be able to cycle at this age and be able to move independently, but they have been able to do that. And so that again is something that we know for sure works. If if women are trained how to use cycles, if women are given with the right kind of infrastructure to be able to cycle, then it is quite powerful.
Thank you so much. I feel, especially moved by this topic. I think women face also a lot of stigma when learning to cycle at a, like a older age. But I think uh, over and over again, women have shown great courage and a great need, great need for freedom to move around the city, for freedom financially. So they need to go out to work. They need to, just break these barriers that don't allow us to take the streets and take ownership of our own lives. So thank you so much for sharing this. And you also touch another very important topic, which is representation. You were talking about design, but also about policy creation, and representation is especially key regarding this. And Julia from TUMI and with the Women Mobilize Women initiative from since 2018, what are the major learnings that have come from the Women Mobilize Women program since its launch? And what does your recent gender data gap study is telling us? Please share a little bit more around that.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say for the network or the initiative itself, since 2018, we've really seen that it's possible to create a global network that lasts and is very engaged. And I think the reason for this is because, from what you can also tell in the space, that the daily mobility experienced by women and gender diverse people is really something that is much more personal rather than technical than we might expect at first sight. So you can't escape it, and it has a lot to do, as you said, with freedom. So I think that's why we have an ever-growing network where people that have been around from day one are still very close to Women Mobilize Women. And yeah, so much for the network itself. And the study findings, I would like to highlight a few of the key findings. There's really so much material in there. I will share the link in a moment, but it became really clear that, as Lorena said, that we need an intersectional perspective. So there were significant differences between women when it comes to age and income. So affordability was one of the key factors. The lower the income, the more trade-offs women in the three cities, Gauteng, Nairobi, and Lagos, had to do when it comes to things such as comfort, safety, affordability, efficiency. So yeah, the modes of transport chosen kind of sinks when you have a lower income, and that's why it's really important to look at the experiences on an individual level. And when it comes to the gender data gap, what I also wanted to highlight is that the methodology really matters, and it matters which questions we ask and how we ask them. And when women are asked in the right way, and other marginalized groups as well, they're really the experts in creating the transport systems that they want to use and will use, and that are safe, reliable, accessible, and affordable. And so I would say we should make use of this expertise and bet on participatory measures and setting up gender diverse teams. So another thing that was pointed out in the study that I found was really interesting, that women were also asked what brings you joy in your daily commutes, which is quite unusual. And a lot of the women pointed out that the sense of community when traveling helping each other out with children and with elderly people and looking out for one another and developing strategies to deal with safety concerns like checking for certain things in the car and so on and so forth. That was really highlighted. So that's one of the most positive aspects for the women in the study when traveling. I thought that was a quite unusual insight.
Yeah, it's super inspiring. We were talking about freedom and now joy, and I think I think listening that we are experiencing these states, these inner states, thanks to the way that we move, is gives a lot of hope in the future. Like for years, the system has made sure that we are inside our houses, not talking to each other, not being in the street. And now I think a lot of initiatives have allowed us to go the opposite, in the opposite direction, where we are in touch with each other, organizing, doing our work, and taking the space that belongs to us, thanks to the bicycle, or thanks to a bus system, and thanks to representation, just as Tumi has also worked on. So from so many different aspects and corners of the work, we are slowly but surely and strongly getting to a place where we reclaim our space, which is actually, the point. I think one city that is particularly inspiring in the recent years is Bogota. The work that Claudia Lopez has done in the city is inspiring and groundbreaking, and I think it's also the continuation and a government that is listening to the work that other organizations have been doing for quite a while, just as the Espacio. Maybe Lina, you can share more around the efforts that the city is making through policy and physical interventions, which are huge. And there's a particular initiative that we love, which is La Rolita. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more of La Rolita.
Sure, Veronica. La Rolita is a great initiative. I also love it. So the integrated transport, public transport system in Bogota was operated exclusively by private operators that had license to do that. They participated in a bid for operating routes and everything. And La Rolita is actually the first public operator, and it had a very specific goal of starting its routes operated exclusively by women. And that is fantastic. As we all know, the transport sector is very much male dominated. And especially when it comes to these jobs that are associated with certain gender roles and gender stereotypes, that male domination is even more evident. So a great example of that is drivers. Bus drivers are the majority of them, if not all of them, are men, and it's quite difficult for women to get into that that industry. They are taught to drive much later in life, when they are taught to drive. Like, men are often taught to drive by their fathers when they are still very young. Their sisters may not get the same treatment. Then again, for driving a bus, you also need certain experience and certain credentials, which women have more difficulty accessing. So having this very clear goal meant that La Rolita started looking for these women who could actually have the skills or certain knowledge. Maybe they needed some capacity building, maybe they needed some further training, but they did. And actually, the first fruits started like that, operating or being driven exclusively by women. And now these women who have already been for a while working with La Rolita are actually mentoring other women, so that they can also take these opportunities, or like be a part of this industry. So this initiative, I also like it very much. I think it's great. And again, the gender equality in the Espacio, we have like four different aspects of how to address gender in mobility. One is road safety, personal safety, mobility of care, but also having job opportunities, because it's key to have equal job opportunities in the transport sector for both men and women. And again, as I've mentioned, it's a very male-dominated sector, and there are certain jobs that are basically impossible to access for women. And then traditional operators may say like, yeah, we had an open call, but not many women came forward, or there was only one and she didn't have the right credentials. So actually making this extra effort of like, no, we are going to get just women and we are going to train them so that they can access this market is great. So yeah, that's an excellent example.
Yeah, I think women, we also make sure that other women enter have access to the opportunities and the expansion that comes from this access, the expansion on having a better income, having just feeling better about ourselves because we have a job, we have in the financial independence, and is inspiring that is that we just want to pass the voice and make sure that other women benefit from these great opportunities. And Kalpana, you mentioned also that safety is very important. Like women need, I mean, you and Aishwarya both mentioned that women need to feel safe. Safety PIN uses data and technology to advocate for improvements to public space, to transport, to urban services that better serve the needs of women and other groups. So what do you see as the role of technology in making urban mobility and transport safer and more accessible? What are the key challenges in collecting data and engaging communities effectively?
Thank you. So I think that's a very important question, and really taking off on everything that all the other speakers have said. I think it's, today being International Women's Day, I think it's important to also recognize how much we have moved in the narrative and the discourse and influencing policy and practices. I've been working on these issues for more than 20 years. Safety Pin is also now 10 years old. And it's very heartening to see so many more organizations, so many more individuals, so many young people, young women, asking for change. And I think that the narrative being changed and the awareness is something that is very important. Safety Pin, we use technology, but really we use technology to collect different kinds of data. So we really believe that data is central to bringing about change. And there are different ways that data can be collected. I mean, we ourselves have a few apps. There's My Safety Pin, which is a free app available on App Store and Google Play, which any of you can download and do a safety audit, as well as see all the safety data in your city. We also collect large-scale images of cities using Safety Pin Night. And we have another app called Safety Pin Site for doing, in-depth qualitative and spatial data collections, specifically around, transport hubs, transport metro stations, bus stops, bus services, etc. As most of the speakers have said, I mean, I think we have recently come up with a new framework, which we have called She Rises, responsive, inclusive, safe, and equitable spaces and services in cities. And we're trying to build a city that really accepts and builds on the work of care, on the economy of care. Other speakers have brought it up, but I think it's important that we center stage it now. Because as we so much data is showing women travel differently, women carry the burden of the work of care, whether it's children, whether it's elderly. And so therefore, but we also know that the work of care, and if one thing COVID really showed us was that the work of care is central to our cities. And I think we need to move it beyond just the fact that women do it, but to say that without the work of care being catered to, our cities would not function. And therefore, in that framework, what we are looking at is sort of four broad areas. One is on public space and infrastructure. So many of the things that a lot of you talked about, streets, street lights, bicycle lanes, good walk paths for pedestrians, public toilets. That's another very big issue that we have to look at when we look at mobility, because studies have shown that there are very few public toilets for women. They may not be safe, they may not be well maintained. So that's the thing, as well as building active streets. I think one of the previous speakers, I think Aishwarya mentioned about what kind of activity and what kind of shops do you have around public spaces. The second stream that we have to look at is really mobility. And in that, like others have said, there is an issue of collecting disaggregated data, unpacking the level of, I think, gendered nature of the entire public transport. So for that, we need data, and all these groups are collecting data, and I think that's important. We need more women in the transport sector, not just as drivers and conductors, but in transport ministries, in transport companies. And I think the Remarkable Women really looks at a whole range of women globally who are breaking some of these glass ceilings. We also need to look at safety as which is one of our central concerns, because we know that the lack of safety impacts women's lives in many, many ways. It affects your ability to access occupations, access education opportunities, go out freely, and certainly to look at leisure. We also need, good services in cities and good response to gender-based violence if women truly need to feel that this city, they have the right to the city. And so I think for us, we do data collection on all these areas. We are able to define different assessment parameters. We specifically try and work with cities. So in Delhi, for example, we did a lot of work around last mile connectivity, how to ensure safety from the bus stop or the metro station, improved lighting. In Bogota, we've worked with the city to look at the bicycle lanes, again, how to make them safer. So I think the point is that we need to we have a multi-pronged approach. We work in partnerships and collaborations, but we recognize that data is very crucial, that interventions is very important, and we need to make sure that policies are made gender responsive and gender transformative eventually.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, I want to jump into questions before the time ends, if you agree. And but before that, I also want to mention that we will have tomorrow a webinar, Mainstreaming Women in Mobility. And we will explore lessons learned from Indonesia, Egypt, and Brazil. A lot of these topics, including the segregated data as a component of key successful policy design and urban design, street design as well, will be present. Also, race, equity, representation, women helping women, and that will happen tomorrow at 9 a.m. East time. You can register today. You can find all the information on Twitter or on itdp.org. And I'll just remind you when we end. But let's go to questions. I don't know if we have someone from the audience that would like to say something. I don't see any hands raised, but if someone does, please, please say something. All right. Seems like we don't have any questions. Then I'm happy to ask our speakers if you want to share any final thoughts, because I think all we've said, we know about it, but then what would be like the last mile? How do we get cities to commit more? How can we get inspiration from a city like Bogota maybe to make this change happen in the world? If you want to share that, maybe we can now switch the order a little bit, and we can begin with Lina.
Sure, thank you. I think it's necessary to also understand and address, and here I mentioned something that Lorena spoke about, and it's the difference also among women. So women also experience the city differently depending to their race or depending to their level of income. They have different access to different opportunities, and it's important that we do not see women as just one homogeneous group. And also kind of mainstreaming this gender mobility focus throughout policies. So not only transport policies, but for instance, Bogota is building a care network, and the city is centralizing care services in different neighborhoods in what they have called the manzanas del cuidado, which means translates roughly to care blocks. And I think it's important to also address what mobility needs do women have in these care blocks or to access care services. Again, for instance, a lot of times we see that efficiency is used as the main criteria for designing transport policies. Like it is most important than everything else, and a lot of the things that women need from transport services are really not efficient because they have very different mobility patterns and mobility needs that sometimes are made invisible when you only care about efficiency, or when you, for instance, don't take into account short distance trips, like pedestrian trips that are shorter than 15 minutes. So I think it's important that to go beyond efficiency and start addressing also like specific needs that women may have, and again addressing them and designing to solve them, and also again not considering women as just like one group that has the same needs, because women are very different we are very different among ourselves, and we all have different needs depending on a lot of things. So I think that those two things are still what we should inspire cities to do.
Thank you so much. Addressing difference. And then Aishwarya, from your perspective, what would you like to share?
So gender is a variable that greatly influences travel behavior, but it's often the least understood, and that's the reason why our streets, our public transport are the way they are. Uh, Cities think that they're gender neutral, but it is very gendered, of course. And like Lena very rightly said, that even these perspectives from women would be different from the groups that they belong to, the class that they belong to as well, or their caregiving responsibility. And it's very important that, like Kalpana ma'am had also pointed out, representation is key. Unless you have women who are able to, one, share from their own experiences what women friendly systems would be like, there's going to be this notion of creating systems which work for everybody, which is not the case at all. So I believe very firmly that, one, representation is important. Second, experiential learning is very important. Even if there are men on the on the team, they need to be able to go out on the streets accompanying a woman, just to see what it feels like to be able to have those caregiving responsibilities, be able to shuttle so many modes, then get to work, get to school in different places as well. So I do think that experiential learning is also very important. And again, the emphasis on data cannot be stressed enough, because that's the evidence. Those are the backbones of what your policy would be formulated in, how your designs itself are going to be implemented. So using qualitative, quantitative, spatial data. It's a fabulous work that Safety Pin is doing, and I really commend the team for that. But these things are very important for them to be in a fashion that's understandable, to drive data-based decisions itself. And I feel that this is very critical for governments and cities to make their streets, make their public transport work for women.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya. Non-gender neutral representation, learning, men learning, and data. And Lorena, maybe we can go with you. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce the speech of my colleagues in here. I think that data is truly important, and it's important to understand that in many places to understand the reality is important to stop the data under reporting. And when we stop the data on the reporting, we will see the increasing of data that we just don't want to deal with. So, for example, to understand the sexual violence here in Brazil, we, with a serious program of data notification, we will see a growth of these cases. So, but this is important to make a policy based on evidences. And there are another thing that I think is important is participation. I think we need more women in leadership positions. I think we need a stronger process of social participation, including women, including the routine of women, and I think this is important to us as a researchers. Talk with these groups, put the woman in the center of the discussion. I think that's it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, data repeating, representation, participation, but this is really important. As Aishwarya said, we don't stress enough these components. I just want to make sure that we have a few more minutes after the time, so we are able to listen from Julia and Kalpana. So Julia, can you share final thoughts, please?
Yeah, I think everything really goes in line with what the fellow speakers have said. I would like to stress again the way we conduct research to get to this data, because the qualitative data is really scarce at the moment. It's often the qualitative methods are very much overlooked, and that is why we're particularly proud of this study of decoding women's travel experience because there was a mixed method approach that included surveys online and in-field, then the so-called ride-alongs where the researchers accompanied women from the moment they prepare for the journey to their destination and documented everything they think and feel and how they make certain decisions with what in mind. And then also focus groups for only women and workshops where they really got to share on a more deeper level in a safer space. And what was fascinating there was that the focus of the result really shifted. So before in the surveys, it was more about things like infrastructure and maybe affordability. And only when it came to those more individual level methods like the workshops or the ride-alongs was the safety concerns became really, really clear. So I think this really goes to show that we not only need data, but we also need really good quality data that, as Lorena said, puts women in the focus, which should be a given, but still isn't. That would be my final words.
Thank you so much. So methodology, data, but also qualitative data to help us shape policy better. And Kalpana, please, can you share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I don't want to repeat everything as everyone has said. I think the important points, I would just add that we need to center stage the economy and the ethics of care in our cities so that all elements of public infrastructure, public services become more responsive to women, but as well as so many other groups when we center stage care. That would be children, elderly, the disabled, people from gender minorities. If we move away from the male as norm, the able-bodied male as norm, we will have a much more caring city. And I think with so many people now working on the issue, I think we have enough and such a strong network around the world. We should aim high. We should really aim to change the narrative and the discourse now.
I love those words as the end. Let's aim high. Today is the day. Let's go and take the streets with our bicycles, with our bodies, with our legs. And thank you all for your participation. It has been truly an honor to moderate this space. I hope we can see each other in the virtual world, of course, but one day maybe in person. And I will be very, very happy to meet you all. So to all of you, thank you also for listening and being part of this space. Make sure you follow up our speakers, the organizations that participated today, for all the resources that we just mentioned, for more conversation, for more content. There's not enough that we can do to transform this world and make it a better world for women, but for everybody as well, because when we improve it for women, it improves automatically for the rest of the world. And don't forget to register for the March 9th webinar for tomorrow. It will take you 2 minutes, and it's going to be a fantastic and very rich content event. So have a nice day. Let's commemorate this day, and thank you to you all.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.